Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the next fantastic episode of the Fantastic Forum. I'm Patrick Michael Strange. We're here at Victory Comics again. These guys are awesome. They let us back in. We're partying. We're having fun. Look at all these comic books. We got another great episode. We got a great group of people here on the forum today. Charlie Reeves here today, Abby Pritchard, and Steve Simpson. We're going to talk about the marketing ploys that Marvel, DC, they all do to bring us in as readers to pick up the AVX, to pick up before Watchmen. You know, why do they always do this? It seems like we're always building up to the next big thing, and there's not enough character development. So I have my thoughts, but I want to hear you guys. Let's start with Steve.
Well, marketing ploys aren't anything new in comics, especially back in the days when they almost exclusively did single-issue stories. Even then, there were a lot of marketing ploys. You had covers with everyone dead, and then in the inside, not a soul died.
Yeah.
So it isn't anything new. I think what's starting to get a lot of people is like you said, the constant building towards the next big event.
Yeah.
And you have one event after another every single year. You can actually set your clock by this. And as much as we want to complain about it, the comic companies don't care if we're still giving them our money.
True.
I tend to think, I do think that you're correct. I think that, you know, I was seeing issues of Fear itself still on the shelves when Avengers vs. X-Men was brought in. And in terms of the big events, I will often skip every other one because as soon as the world ends, the world starts to end again, you know?
Very true.
Even when you have sort of everybody on high gear and everything dramatic is happening all at once, all the time, you just get adjusted to it. There's no longer a sense of urgency or a sense of danger or whatever when, you know, they're having a dramatic storyline because they're always having a dramatic storyline. Mm-hmm. And the world is ending now, but you also know the world will be ending next month. Frankly, everything a comic book company does is a gimmick because whatever they're doing, they're trying to sell comics. And if it's done right, it can work really well. But if you're doing it all the time with everybody, first of all, you're not going to hit it out of the park every time, so you're going to get a lot of duds. And second of all...
Like Fear itself.
Yeah. You're going to get duds, and you're also simply going to lessen the emotional impact of the ones that do work. Mm-hmm. So you're cheapening everything on your board by making that so commonplace. I would say, on the other hand, things like DC's New 52, while they had certain comics that I thought were not particularly good, they did have a lot of good ones, and it made it much more accessible to people who were not familiar with the comics. I know there have been titles and characters that I haven't explored because their history seemed far too big and intimidating. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I would start reading them with the New 52. And it worked, at least for some characters, because, you know, it sold more comics, which made the producers happy, and it, you know, allowed people to have a clear doorway into a specific world, which made the customers happy.
Charlie, on the same subject.
Basically, I think that the industry is kind of scrambling just to get money into their pockets as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, the comic book industry, I think the mentality is that it could cave at any moment. I don't have any problem with the event. I tend to like them more when they're more story-driven. I feel like they sometimes only have an idea that they try and base, you know, a year's worth of books around when it's a story that doesn't really necessitate a year's worth of stories.
Oh, that's so true.
And, I mean, and I think also the problem just with the industry in general, I think that they're entirely too preoccupied with trying to come off with jumping on points for new readers and everything like that. And I always thought, like, as a kid, for me, like, part of the fun of comic books was picking up a random issue of Spider-Man and getting the little asterisk thing in the corner. And it was like, okay, if you want to figure out what this is, pick up Spider-Man 151.
Definitely.
And so you'd have to go and play detective and do the back issue thing. And I think that was a lot of fun. And it's so much easier now with Wikipedia. Like, you can get caught up like that.
That's a great point. That I found myself. That's really what drew another thing that drew me into comic books and the richness of the history of these characters and the evolution of these characters. That I found myself like you wanting to hunt that issue down at the comic book shop next time I went there, just so I could understand that a little bit more.
I
That's a
think
great point.
That's a good point, but it depends to a certain extent on your resources.
True.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people would come into the comic book shop where I worked and say, "Oh, we've never been in a comic book store before," because there are a lot of places where they just don't have them anymore. So,
Right.
I mean, I do think that was how I, first started reading stuff, picking up a random issue and then working my way backwards. But there are some people who were just, because the movies have made these comic characters so much more mainstream, I think that people who don't have that dedication but are still interested in the characters, it's made it a lot, like there are certain stories that work better for them, and it's understandable that the comic book creators would want to cater to them to a certain extent, because once you draw those people in, then they can start, enjoying and going on the treasure hunt and all that stuff. But, if you've just gone and seen Iron Man and you're like, okay, I'm going to go to the comic store and I'm going to find some good Iron Man comics and yay, right?
I think those tend to be the characters that kind of bring in the most readers. I mean, everybody knows who Batman is. If you were interested in a Batman comic book, you'd be reading Batman already.
Yeah.
But so I think that the movies that tend to bring people in are your Iron Mans, I'm sorry to say, the Spirit and stuff like that, stuff that people don't know about. And then they pick up the Spirit and then they find that it's nothing like the movie and they're disappointed.
Yeah.
It's not Sin City. Yeah, no, I mean, I think also a big problem I have with the stunt thing right now, too, is I also remember sounding like a curmudgeon-y old man, like a time when comic book, like, big things happen in just a random issue.
Yeah.
Like Gwen Stacy dying in, whatever, like 121 or something
Yeah.
like that. And now it's like all the big stuff happens in Civil War #2.
Very
And,
true.
I don't know. It's
Yeah, but you want to talk about gimmicks, what you were saying before about using movies to draw people in. From the standpoint of working in a comic shop, the movie tie-in comic is one of the worst gimmicks they have ever done.
Yeah.
Not just from a quality standpoint, but people come in and that's all they want. They want the book to be exactly like the movie they just saw. And you can give that to them, but once they dig around a little more and realize that's all there is, they don't come back in.
Well, that's
Gotcha.
not necessarily exclusive to comic books. I remember, seeing movies when I was a kid, and then I would go into my local Borders, and there would be, the movie adaptation of the book, right? And it was basically the same. Like for movies that were not based on a book originally, they would just have the adaptation of that. I definitely don't disagree with you in terms of they're horrible things that
Yeah.
add nothing to the
They're
the
basically
picture.
a $2.99
You know,
ad for the movie.
People would come in after seeing the Iron Man movie and want the adaptation. I'd be like, well, you can get that if you want, but you'd have a whole lot more fun with Invincible Iron Man. And I tend to think that if you're gonna, the greatest thing I think about not necessarily the big events, but the fact that the Marvel Universe can sort of interpose on itself, was that a lot of my favorite characters I discovered in the peripheral pages of the comic I was originally reading. I discovered Deadpool through Spider-Man, and I discovered, Black Widow or Maria Hill through Iron Man, and it was just kind of, I think that adds a lot of value to expanding the picture.
So would you
for a
say
lot of fans.
crossovers are cool in their own single
Well,
issues, in the runs, title runs, but the big crossover event type stuff,
Well, exactly.
where that's too much.
One of my favorite things this year was the 2 issues of Avenging Spider-Man where Carol Danvers showed up as Captain Marvel, and it was so well done and so well written and so well illustrated, and it was these 2 fabulous characters bouncing off each other, but it wasn't like a big story. They were flying around in a plane after a bank robber, right? And it was just so fun to read. I don't want a big event, but I also love it when Marvel remembers that it exists in one big universe, and these people sometimes pass each other on the street or whatever.
everybody's in New York.
Exactly.
In Marvel.
I
And
like
it just
that.
cracks me up that Daredevil has like this set of blocks that's his spot,
Yeah.
and Spider-Man is uptown, and I think Marvel really needs to spread their guys around.
Well, I don't think they need to spread them out. I just think they need to,
Or they need
let
a
them
giant
have.
map of the city, just
Yeah.
with little X's for each character.
Well, that's why I like that the Runaways were in LA, right? But I mean, I think they've sort of blown it up too big in terms of, in order to have all these people together, you have to have something big going on. No, you really don't. They all live in New York.
In regards to the marketing ploys that we're doing,
Yeah.
these big events, let's also talk about the gimmicks, such as the chromium covers. If you're a child of the 80s, I'm sure you all remember this. You could feel everything. The
chromium
poly bag
covers.
stuff that we
Hologram
had with
covers were my
Superman,
favorite.
the
I love the
hologram
hologram
covers.
covers.
The hologram covers from
Can you remember your first gimmick cover?
my first gimmick cover was probably the Phalanx Covenant run in X-Men that had the little
On the side.
hologram strip running down the side of it.
Yeah.
And after that was the hologram card pasted onto the cover for, God, what was that?
I think mine was when Wolverine got his bone claws pulled out.
Yeah,
I think that was my
it.
first
it.
gimmick
That's
one.
when they started
Did
doing
it have the
that.
die cut cover
I think-
where it was
I
kind of
th-
cut?
I think
No,
my
no.
copy was a Gambit hologram. I don't know why they
Oh,
put
okay.
Gambit
Yeah.
on the Wolverine issue.
They
It
put a
didn't make
different
any sense.
hologram on every tie-in comic, and it was spread all across the X titles. I mean, you want to talk about having big, giant, monolithic crossover miniseries these days. Back in the early 90s, they did it by spreading it out across several different titles. So you had to go out, and if you wanted Avengers, X-Men Blood Ties, you had to go out and pick up Uncanny X-Men. Then you had to go out and pick up Avengers. Then you had to go out and pick up Generation X, whatever was next in the series.
You had to get them all. All right, let's go into the next segment. Signing off for now.
One of the first anime programs to reach American shores was Tetsujin 28 Go. Known as Gigantor in this country, the story of a giant robot controlled by a young boy struck a chord with viewers and became one of the most beloved cartoons of all time. For those of us with a super robot fetish, Gigantor is celebrated in this toy from Japan. Soft Garage's Legend of Gokin series, Tetsujin 28 Go Chogokin figure, released in the year 2000 as a special 45th anniversary limited edition item, this die-cast toy is all metal. The figure includes a solid metal control box and removable PVC flames for the jetpack rockets. The action figure stands approximately 5 inches tall, with multiple points of articulation, and features a high-quality paint job.
Gigantor, the space-age robot, is at your command. Gigantor, the space-age robot, his power is in your hand. Gigantor.
A beautiful and faithful representation of the legendary space-age robot.
Hi, I'm Phil Lamar, and you're watching Fantastic Four.
And now, in my best mechanical robotian kind of sound, I say, "Warning, warning, it will not compute. Danger, Will Robinson."
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Victory is ours. We are back. The Fantastic Forum at Victory Comics, Falls Church, Virginia. We are back, the Fantastic Forum, with my great group of panelists, Charlie Reeves, Abby Pritchard, Steve Simpson. We're talking about, the big events, the crossovers, the marketing ploys. We discussed, the goofy gimmicks that the companies do, the chromium covers, the die cut covers, the poly bags. The best gimmicks crossovers. What is your favorite crossover event of recent memory?
Favorite event, I would say, just because it had the most legs as a story, I thought was Civil War. My least favorite, I was really disappointed with Blackest Night. Blackest Night, I thought, had such an awesome build-up, with Sinestro Corps War, all of that stuff, and then it just wouldn't stop.
Abby?
I tend to not. I tend to focus on sort of the smaller issues and the smaller character arcs. I would say that Civil War was not actually one of my favorites, not because I didn't think that it raised a lot of interesting questions that Marvel was due to raise, but because Mark Miller tends to write everyone like more of a jackass than they are, and also because...
and not turn in his scripts on time.
Well, they brought up so many great questions, and it sort of began really well. And then about halfway through, they realized they didn't know where they were going. And at the end, they just sort of threw it out and went, well, that was fun. I hope you guys didn't want anything in conclusion.
I think Civil War is a perfect example of one that could have worked better than it did. And I say I like it because I think it's better than everything that came out around it. But
I thought, I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I do think that House of M worked as an event because it made sense for everyone to be involved.
Yes.
It had long-standing conclusions that they actually stuck with, and, it showed us interesting elements of a lot of characters that we hadn't seen before.
Steve, give us the final word.
All right. Not actually my favorite, but hands down the most effective big event in recent memory for me was Siege. Short, simple, to the point, got the story told. The ending was something people who had been following New Avengers saw coming, but for the rest of us, it was actually a breath of fresh air. It just got the story out there and got it done, and probably some of Bendis's most effective use of the least amount of dialogue possible. The worst one, and I have to go way back for this out of an entire slew of bad crossovers logged away in the back of my brain. Executioner's Song from the 90s.
Wow. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I think if you're a fan of Watchmen, there was a big discussion about, and if you read on the boards, you shouldn't read this before Watchmen stuff. It's blasphemous. Alan Moore isn't behind it. You shouldn't read it. But we're picking it up. I know I picked it up. I haven't read them yet, I have to say. They're sitting there. Because I want to see what the fuss is about. And, it's the Watchmen. I still have I want to still connect with these characters, although Watchmen is amazing. It was what it was. We shouldn't have touched it. But let's talk about that elephant. Before Watchmen, who wants to go first?
Well,
Steve.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Jumping right in there. Before Watchmen, yeah, it's not filling any great storytelling void that was left in the wake of Watchmen. Watchmen did what it wanted to do, and it did it pretty damn well, to be fair. But if you're going to be one of those people who insists that Moore's work be placed on some sort of pedestal, go live with him in his garbage can. Seriously. Because, one, let's be absolutely 100% honest about Alan Moore. He's a hack. He has not created an original character in his life. Okay? All of the Watchmen characters are derivatives of older characters that DC would not let him tell the story he wanted to tell with. So he just created these paper-thin analogs for him. All right? That said, before Watchmen, not a redefining moment in comic history, but it's not bad. I've read a few issues. It's actually pretty damn good. So people are wailing and gnashing their teeth at the big, evil corporate DC. But all these, and there's been a lot of talk in particular, because this sort of touches on the issue of creator-owned stuff. Again, Alan Moore didn't really create any of these characters himself, and he knew what he was signing when he signed his contract about Watchmen, all right? So let's not pretend there's any sort of sanctity to it.
Okay, I don't know if I want to co-sign on that. I kind of see where you're going, but let's. Do we have a varying opinion, or do you want? Who else wants to try? Go ahead, Charlie.
No, I will respectively disagree, just because I believe Alan Moore is worthy of all the praise that he has. That said, I don't think that DC's in the wrong for putting the books out. I think it is well within their rights to do it. I agree. I think Alan Moore signed the dotted line. It's hurtful, I think, at the thought of what could have been done at DC had they not pushed him away. And I think it probably, in my opinion, I think it would have been in both their best interest to keep him playing in their field, I think. But yeah, before Watchmen, though, I gotta say, it's like the Avatar movie. Like, when I was done with it, I didn't.
Let's not pretend anything is as bad as the Avatar movie.
I would probably be the only person to ever compare Watchmen and Avatar. But basically, at the end of both of those, I didn't really have any desire to see what else happened to them.
Okay.
I know what happens before Watchmen. It's in Watchmen.
Yeah.
I don't care anymore. I don't need to see what happens to the comedian or Ozymandias and all this other stuff. So that's my opinion.
Fair point.
I tend to think of Watchmen as pretty complete, and I think that's one of the reasons why I haven't picked up the Before Watchmen books yet. I do know that DC went out of its way to get, really good authors and artists for it. And as for Alan Moore, I tend to think he's quite good. I wouldn't say that he is on a pinnacle above every other comic book writer, but I do think he's good. On the other hand, I tend to see this not as a you cannot touch Alan Moore's baby, but more reflective of how the comic book industry is often willing to screw over creators. Alan Moore gets attention for it because he's a big name, but they've done it to a lot of other people who have contributed tons of things to comics that you've never heard of because the industry was willing to screw them. And I think,
Alan Moore's vocal about it, too.
Alan Moore does not like anyone to touch his babies, right?
No.
So he's going to throw a fuss no matter how good it is or no matter how relevant it would have been.
Yeah, I'll care about his opinion on that when he calls up the estate of every character that he was using for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen when he calls up their creators' estates and thanks them for those characters. Then I will actually care what he has to say about creators.
I agree, but I think League is a little different in the sense that those guys are in public domain at this point.
I don't think he can speak past his beard.
But I do agree. I do think that Alan Moore, as much as I like him, is a curmudgeon-y old man who's inconsolable, and and every year it's going to get worse and worse.
Well, his
and we will not see him at
personality
DC ever
doesn't-
again.
No.
I mean, I think I don't necessarily think it would be fun to sit down and have tea with him, but I don't think that's necessarily relevant to whether or not DC should be allowed to, take his characters or whoever's characters and use them as they want. Like, my opinion is not, it's frustrating, less because I feel bad for Alan Moore, who is probably rich as hell and would be pissed no matter what they did.
No, he lives in a garbage can, remember?
More,
Real quick before we...
You're mistaking him for Grover. I understand the confusion,
No, Oscar.
but whatever.
Let's get off of Moore because I'm sure we could go on forever about the whole Alan Moore issue. We're getting ready to finish up this show. As you can see, we're having so much fun. I want to go back to Marvel Now real quick. DC 52 was great for DC. It brought in a lot of new readers. So now here comes Marvel Now. Couple of words from each of you guys on the Marvel Now as we trail off. Go ahead, Charlie.
I think it's a good idea. It's writer-based, following writers moving around to different books. I think it's fine.
Abby?
I'm excited about a few of the titles that I've seen and a little apprehensive about others, but that's no different from the 52. I do think that they could use promoting it more because I remember everywhere I turned when the 52 was coming out, people were like, so what do you think of this new 52 thing? Nobody has heard of Marvel Now unless
Agreed.
they're actively involved in the comic world, right? They need to promote it better and they need to make it more definitive as not an event, but a restructuring.
Steve?
Bendis' all-new X-Men is hands down the dumbest idea to come out of Marvel in 10 years. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody here at Victory Comics here in Falls Church. This has been another great episode of Fantastic Forum. I'm Patrick. This is Charlie, Abby, Steve. We're signing off. Another great episode. I hope you come back. We've got a lot of topics we want to discuss with you, and we want to hear what you guys think. Check us out.
Join the Fantastic Forum fan community on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for all the latest news and updates.